to the Book Club. Every week we review a book that's been released in the sporting world. It may be a book that's well worthy of your consideration from the present day, or indeed a classic that we think you just have to get your hands on. I'm Peter Martin. I'm delighted to say the former literary editor of the Herald, Hugh MacDonald, joins me on the programme to review this week's book. And this week's book is about one of the greatest players of all time, Ferenc Puskás, and the book looks at two great clubs that he played for, that wonderful Real Madrid side of the 60s, and of course who can forget the magical international Magyars of Hungary that Ferenc Puskás graced for so many years as well. Hugh, certainly when I think of Ferenc Puskás, my abiding memory, would you believe, is seeing an old man sitting in the Hilton Hotel in Glasgow, and nobody recognised him. They were walking past him, and I just walked up with my Champions League programme and asked him to sign it. He gave me a wry little smile, signed it, Ferenc Puskás, and I felt like the luckiest man on earth. Did you get a sense of him in this book?
Get a sense of him in the book. It's a peculiar book because it's not written as a book of chronological order of his life. It's a series of little vignettes, a series of little stories about Puskás, and it's told in a very one-sided way, in a nice, affectionate way, and like György Szöllösi, the author of it, is a friend of Puskás, a friend of his wife who has just died recently as well. So it's very partisan towards Puskás. So taking all that into account, it's still some wonderful stories. And the thing I loved about it is it brings to life just how much Puskás meant to men of a certain age, and certainly men of a certain age in Glasgow, because the game he holds out is his best game, better than the 7-3 at Wembley, 6-3 at Wembley, better than 7-1 beating England in Budapest. The game Puskás holds out as his greatest game was at Hampden, where he scored 4 in a European Cup final. Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned there that obviously the author was a great friend of Puskás and the family. Is that a failing of the book then? Yeah, there's bits where you want to say, you know, you've been too kind here, you've been, you know, the guy wasn't a saint, things like that. And there is that side of it, no doubt about it. There is a positive, of course, that he gets incredible access to stories, you know, and there's the real poignancy at the end where Puskás is suffering from a kind of cerebral disease, whether it be Alzheimer's or whatever, and this guy's visiting him in hospital and getting the hospital stories in it. And so there's an upside in that, and one of the upsides in that is there's one of the great anecdotes in the book is, like, at the end of his life, Puskás has got this dementia, he shuffles about in slippers, and his carer decides, why not take him outside? So he goes outside, and Puskás, the carer, sees a ball and says, I wonder if this old guy can still kick a ball. So he lobs the ball to Puskás, who takes it on his chest and volleys it into the net from 40 yards. And you just go, that's insight. That kind of stuff makes the book. But yeah, don't read this book if you're expecting a real critical account of a life of a player. Read this book if you want the celebration of a life as a player. Well,
and with that in mind, the celebration of a truly gifted player who may not have been even in the modern game, never mind the 50s and 60s, he's not what you would call your typical build of a footballer.
No, I mean, the great thing about him was he didn't play football because he was banned by the Hungarian FA after the uprising. He wasn't playing football for 18 months, you know, so can we say he had a disposition to put on some weight? But he was lightning over the first 10 yards, and what he was his left foot, I think, was one of the great left foots of all time. And I think, you know, he just came about when I was just starting to get into football, you know, being 4 or 5 years of age, but I've done a lot of reading about him, I've watched him on video, I've talked to guys who have saw him. Alex Ferguson, by the way, does a brilliant foreword to this book, and I think he is up there. If you're naming the 5 best players in the world ever, Puskás is in the argument.
Yeah, and with that in mind, the book itself, and of course Sir Alex Ferguson, just a brief little insight. He was without question one of the greatest players of all time. Does the book do him justice?
It does him justice in the sense of all the good side of Puskás will come out. If you want a fuller version of Puskás, you can read the Rogan biography of it. I would say if you want a book of anecdote, a book to have by your bed to give you a sense of what Puskás who or was, that's the book to get.
And of course the most important factor here, what are you giving it out of 10?
7. A 7. I'll give it
7 out of 10. Okay, if you want to get a hold of it, György Szöllösi, Ferenc Puskás, there it is. If you are of a particular vintage and you remember that wonderful day at Hampden in 1960 when Real Madrid demolished Eintracht Frankfurt, if you remember that day, and of course you know all about this man, you want to know some of those little golden nuggets that Hugh's been talking about, then 7 out of 10. Thanks to Hugh MacDonald. Great to have a chat with him on this book. There will undoubtedly be more books that we will look at and review, not only the up-to-date releases in the sporting world, but some of the classics as well. Thanks for joining us in the book club.